Hey, it's Wednesday. You know what that means? A Jack Fox tribute show. Dalton Wasserman is with us as well.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And it is a Wednesday edition of Locked On Lions, everybody, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, on a Wednesday, 9/25, and a Thursday, September 26th. Thanks for making us your first listen. And, of course, checking us out wherever you get your podcasts. That includes on our Locked On Lions YouTube channel. Appreciate all the everydayers that are out there as well. Checking us out, Locked On Lions today for this Wednesday is brought to you by Gametime. You download the Gametime app, you create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's for tickets, for anything. Lions, Seahawks this weekend, Tigers going for the playoffs. Get your tickets now at Gametime. Follow us on Twitter at Derry Speaks, at Locked On Lions, Matt Derry Facebook fan page. The man from Pro Football Focus, Dalton Wasserman. I listen to him on the PFF College Football podcast and everything else. And of course, has joined us in the past, joins us today, talking a little Lions, get ready for the Seahawks here on a Wednesday. Dalton, great to see you.
Great to see you too. Good, feels good to be back. And man, the Lions got a big win this past week, didn't they? They really needed that one.
They did. All right, let's get to the good stuff here. The Jack Fox tribute show. You know, he's been unbelievable. Today was named NFC Special Teams Player of the Week. It just seems like every kick is long. Every kick is downed inside the 10. How does PFF feel about the punt god, Jack Fox?
Well, right now, look, it might sound a little bit low, but right for the season, he's our 9th highest graded punter right now, but really tight at the top of the rankings there. So week to week, that changes a lot. But I'll tell you, we're living in this age where people are talking about, okay, too high defenses and defenses not giving up big explosive plays and offenses having to methodically work down the field. It's big time in this past game to get 4 punts inside the 20-yard line. And even an offense that can be explosive as the Cardinals can, if you make them go 85, 90, 95 yards, they're just not going to be as efficient like that, right? When it takes 14, 15, 16 plays to work down the field. So, look, it's still the third phase is still really important. And I know the focus this year has been on kickoff and kick return and adding returns and everything like that. But if you still have a valuable punter like this and you can flip the field, win field position, that still wins a lot of ball games.
It's funny, Dalton, you and I talked in the offseason. It's like, will the Lions even use a kicker? Will they even use a punter? And obviously, when they're pinned deep, we already saw Jack Fox, a fake punt with Sione Vaki in the Tampa game. But bottom line is a guy like this, like you said, can make a difference and probably made the difference this past Sunday. Yeah,
absolutely. He sure did. I mean, especially when you talk about, I think, a lower scoring game than we may have expected, right? A final score of 20, I believe it was 20-16 or 20-13, right?
Yeah.
And it was a high total, in the pregame, where I think the total was somewhere around 52. We were expecting a high scoring, high flying game. The Cardinals certainly lean towards their offense. The Lions are still figuring things out in the secondary. But when you get tight to the vest games like that, again, field position matters. And the Cardinals, you could see Kyler Murray trying to force big plays down the field. His average depth of target has increased each week of the season to a season high. I think it was over 13 yards, which is really high for a game against the Lions. So he's trying to take deep shots to compensate for that field position when he should have just been working down the field. And I like the way the Lions worked as well when you talk about running the football and getting back to their roots and just working. I think the entire game script was just a good way for the Lions to get back on track. And again, special teams improves that game script.
Dalton Wasserman with us from Pro Football Focus. I want to get to Aidan Hutchinson's grades, which have been very high, and do some geek out stuff with you. But you just said it. I mean, week 2 was Goff throwing the ball 55 times and way too much. And it's like, all right, let's get the ground game going. And Arizona probably knew that was going to be the game plan, yet couldn't stop it. Montgomery and Gibbs, how good are they right now? And, you look at duos in the league, it's kind of old school football, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you look at the best moments so far of the Lions season. I think about really this entire game, especially in the first half, and the overtime period against the Rams, right, where they ran it. I believe it was 8 out of 9 or 9 out of 10 plays. This Lions team, look, Jared Goff is very good, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is great. Jamison Williams is getting there, and Sam LaPorta. The passing weapons are great. But what makes this team different is this front five, this offensive line and their 2 running backs. Very few teams have an offensive line like this. For me, it's probably the best one in football between them, and Indianapolis is playing great too. It's what makes them different. As you mentioned it, the Cardinals knew it was coming. You know the Lions are going to come out and run the ball, but they're so good at it that you can't stop it anyway. The Rams in that second half of that game, everybody knew the Lions were going to keep running the ball, and they just keep running you over. And they're one of the few teams in football that can do that. And I think after you mentioned throwing too much against Tampa, the roots of this Lions team has always been physicality. They built the offensive line. We can trace it back to when they took Penei Sewell over Jamar Chase, right? They're the more physical football team on both sides of the trenches. I don't want to lose their defensive line here too, with Hutchinson and DJ Reader and guys playing well up front like that. They want to be a physical football team, and Jared Goff has never really been the guy who you go, hey, we need you to throw it 55 times today. He's really good when he can throw it 25 to 30 and work off the run game and play action and be a part of a balanced attack.
You mentioned before about low scoring. I don't think anybody expected 20 to 13. But how about this Lions defense right now and what they're doing, and with all the injuries and losing Derek Barnes, losing Marcus Davenport, a lot of depth. Anzalone doesn't even play, and they hold the Cardinals to 13 points. Pretty impressive, yes?
Incredibly impressive. And I think you got an improved day in coverage for sure, because that was the one concern with the Lions heading into the year. And this is a high-powered Cardinals attack. Make no mistake, they're going to score a lot of points this season on a lot of teams. But to me, the Lions, what it was more so, again, just like the offense, so dominating in the trenches. Aidan Hutchinson with another great game, and he's just unreal. He's got 25 pressures through 3 games, which is just silly. He's second in the league in pass rush grade behind Myles Garrett. He was my pick to win Defensive Player in the Year, and through 3 weeks, he's proven me pretty right. But DJ Reader has been spectacular inside. Levi Awuzurike had a great game, especially after Ali McNeil got hurt. One of the big things in this game for me, the Cardinals' offensive line, too, they're not just a finesse team. Their offensive line is really good. But the Lions on the interior, this was the first game where I really felt like the impact of adding DJ Reader was felt, because the Cardinals could not find what they wanted to in the run game. Those guys up front were just plugging gaps, stopping the run. Between the tackles, I believe the Cardinals had 7 carries for 18 yards, which is just awesome. It's spectacular. So if Reader stays healthy and you get that continued improvement on the interior, you talk about having a front four that's really rounded out now and not just Hutchinson being the superstar.
So they picked on Terrion Arnold early in the game. He got that first PI, then settled in pretty well. You see the rookie through 3 games making progress?
I do. I think, look, most rookie corners are going to go through what he's going through. We're seeing it with Quinyon Mitchell in Philadelphia as well. Look, rookie corners get picked on, and the only guy that didn't really see a lot of those bumps in his rookie year was Sauce Gardner, but Sauce Gardner is a special player, right? Rookie corners go through this. And the one thing I've always loved about Terrion Arnold, he's a competitor. You watch him at Alabama, he's such a fierce competitor, and there's no back down in his game. They're in press coverage a lot. They are making a statement in coverage that we're going to stay in your grill. They do the same thing with Carlton Davis, even though he's a veteran. Aaron Glenn believes in him. He believes in himself. And you do see him gradually getting better. And again, I think that level of competitiveness that you see from Terrion Arnold is really going to come in handy later in the year. It reminds me a lot of a guy like L'Jarius Sneed, who, again, it's like guys are in the NFL and they're all competitive. They made the NFL. But certain guys they're just heart and soul, like just getting after it every single play. And Arnold being one of those guys, I think is going to help him through just getting through those bumps of a young cornerback.
Dalton Wasserman with us from Pro Football Focus. Check him out on Twitter as well at PFF_Dalton, host of the PFF College Football Podcast. Lots going on there I want to get to a little bit later on and ask him what he thought of certainly Michigan USC and this weekend MSU and OSU as a pretty big game. We'll do all of that coming up next. Want to get into a little Seattle too, which is the Lions opponent, of course, Monday night right here on Locked On Lions. And the program today brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel's got the Lions at 4.5 as a favorite over the Seahawks, despite Seattle coming in at 3-0. Want to put some money down in the game or look at the over-under, whatever it is, you can do all of that at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you placed your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Tonight, Tigers and Rays downtown. Tiger Magic number to clinch a playoff spot. Can you believe this? Is 4. Put some money down on the game. Feeling good about the Tigers. Maybe think the Rays win tonight. Who knows? All of that is available for you at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Dalton Wasserman with us from PFF. I mentioned that number, Dalton, during the read there, 4.5. How do you feel about that number for Monday night?
I think it's probably about right. We've seen the Seahawks have played softer competition, although they've won all 3 games, right? So I think it looks like a step up for the Seahawks, and the game is in Detroit. It's really hard to play in Detroit right now. That's quite an environment you guys have going over there. So I think I understand it. I would expect a pretty close game, maybe closer to 3 points. So the number makes it a little funky when it comes to betting on it. But Seattle's playing well. Detroit played well this past week. It's going to be a really good game.
It's funny. I'm going to talk to Corbin Smith, Locked On Seahawks, tomorrow for the Thursday crossover show, and he and I were talking off air first, and he's like, "Hey, it might not be so, but it's not that bad of who we played." And I'm like, Jacoby Brissett, Bo Nix, and Tim Boyle got in the game the other day for the Dolphins, and Skylar Thompson. It's like, I think Jared Goff's gonna be a little bit of an upgrade this week for the Seahawks. Don't you think?
No, absolutely. But I think the one thing I will give the Seahawks credit for is they do have a really good young secondary. And for us, they're leading the league in coverage grade right now. This was the best part of their team last year, honestly, was their secondary. And they had a lot of issues stopping the run. So I think you have an interesting dynamic here where the Lions, what I wouldn't want to see the Lions go back to is what they did in week 2, where all of a sudden we're throwing the ball almost 60 times, right? Because if you do that against this Seattle defense, even with a better quarterback, that's what they want you to do. They want you to try to throw into the teeth of this secondary. Devin Witherspoon's a great player. Tariq Woolen, Julian Love on the back end at safety's playing really well. They've got a really good secondary that you don't want to mess around with still. So I think the key for the Lions is staying physical and still leaning into that run game.
It's interesting. Seattle comes in 3-0, obviously still an underdog. Lions at 2-1. And like we talked about, I mean, the schedule's been very soft with New England, Denver, and Miami last week, who had no chance. But man, they play really well in Detroit. 2 years in a row now. Geno Smith, it's like Ford Field's second home. Is there any rhyme or reason to that?
I think it's in a dome, and I think they have a really good passing attack, and the Lions have been struggling in the secondary. That's why they went and fixed it in the offseason. And you look at these receivers that Seattle has. DK Metcalf is fantastic. Tyler Lockett's fantastic. Jackson Smith-Njigba is coming along here. He had a really big game against New England. You've got a good quarterback. You've got 3 really good receivers, and you've got an offense that likes to attack downfield. They got Ryan Grubb as their new offensive coordinator from right down the street at the University of Washington. And what they did at Washington and what they're doing at Seattle was throwing it deep more often and better than anybody, right? And Geno Smith over the last 2 years is actually the best deep passer over 20 yards in the league over the last 2 years. It's kind of just all molded together. And those are just the things that have gotten to Detroit, is when you can get deep into their secondary and create those one-on-ones, especially with a guy like Metcalf. They cause real problems for teams down the field and a lot of stress to opposing secondaries.
Aidan Hutchinson facing another backup tackle this week. That's 4 straight. I can't remember a time where, I'm not saying the Lions are getting lucky here, but my goodness, it's just they're facing teams whose tackles are out, as they're down to the 3rd stringer for Seattle this week. So you have to figure Hutchinson's going to be lining up on that left side of the Lions D line, the right side of the Seahawks O line, and trying to do his thing.
Yeah, and Hutchinson usually lines up on that side anyway. So the more times he sees backup right tackles, it's really an advantage to him. So no, that's one of the huge matchups in this game. And the one way that you really slow down Seattle's offense is beating them in the trenches. They didn't run the ball great against New England. They were a little better this past week with Zach Charbonnet. Kenneth Walker's been out with injury at least this past week. And pass protection is the one big question for Seattle, right? And if pass protection is your question, especially at that right tackle spot, Aidan Hutchinson's not the guy you want to be facing, right? Charles Cross at left tackle has been great so far, but the rest of that line is still trying to put it together. Hutchinson could be actually the biggest factor in determining whether or not Seattle has success on offense. And I know it's always, look, he's Aidan Hutchinson. He's a superstar. He's one of those elite pass rushers. But in this matchup specifically, that's what we have to look for, is how does Seattle handle their protections? Are they slided his way? Do they have ways to double and triple team him? Because they're going to need that. We saw it even in the loss against Tampa. He was unblockable. And right now, Hutchinson, again, I picked him for Defensive Player of the Year. right now he would win it. I don't see any doubt about that. And he's the guy that keeps offensive coordinators up at night.
How do you guys, it's interesting. Hutch has always been a PFF darling. Look at Dave Selfaro. He loves him. But like, how do you guys do that? Obviously if he doesn't win at the line of scrimmage, it's pretty obvious. Is it more difficult, I guess, to grade the interior D lineman than the guy like Hutch, who you see lining so far out wide? How do you guys go into doing that?
No, we have a pretty consistent manner of going about it. And what it is more so, it's easier to grade one-on-one matchups. I mean, if he's splitting double teams and things like that and still getting home, we do take that into account some, or if he gets chipped by a back and how much he has to do and how quickly he can win. I think one of the things that separates good pass rushers from the special ones is winning in a really quick manner, right? If you're winning in, say, 1.8 to 2 seconds as opposed to other guys who win in, 2.5 to 3, that matters too, because the whole point is not just trying to get to the quarterback, but get to him as quickly as possible. And Hutchinson, I mean, especially the spin move, when he talks about spamming the spin move, right? He wins so quickly up front, especially if you block him. I couldn't understand at certain points, especially against Tampa, when they had their backup right tackle in and they're leaving him solo. I'm like, it's going to be a second and a half, and he's going to be in the backfield. So it is. Look, we have a consistent way of going about it, and we see other guys like that too. Aaron Donald, who just retired. We see Chris Jones, who does it all the time. And if you win your matchup and you win it quickly, you're going to see some elite grades.
Saw some interesting numbers talking to Dalton Wasserman from Pro Football Focus. I know PFF says, you guys say Lions fifth lowest or fifth best in terms of making tackles. So they're not missing a lot of tackles, which is good. And we talked about the defense a little bit. Anything else stand out the first 3 weeks?
Actually, right now, the tackling grade is the number one and is the best in football through 3 weeks. And I believe last year that was a problem along with the coverage issues. But no, I think to me, what has stood out for the Lions is them just needing to get back to their identity a bit. And Jared Goff did struggle through those first 2 games. He was a lot better against Arizona, and it was weird to see because they were still getting protection. There really wasn't that many issues in pass protection as much as just him missing throws from a clean pocket, which is very uncharacteristic. No matter where Jared Goff has been or what the situation's been, he's always been really good in clean pockets. I think he was second or third in clean pocket passing grade last year. He was second behind Josh Allen. It's weird. So for as much as he did struggle and they asked too much of him, especially in the Tampa game, it was weird to see him struggle like that because usually struggles under pressure. I don't worry about this Lions offense because you have this offensive line and so many weapons, and Goff is going to figure it out. But I do think it's good for them to get back to their roots because they're still arguably the best offensive line in football, and then work the way you were doing last year for the most part. It's run game, it's play action, it's balance, it's clean pockets for Goff, it's thrown over the middle, it's all that stuff, right? I think for a game or two they got away from it, but they're starting to find it again. You can see that against Arizona.
It is interesting. This hasn't been this robust offense like we've seen in the past under Ben Johnson. Game 1, Amon-Ra was nowhere to be found. Last week, Jamison Williams didn't really do anything. Neither did Laporta. Yet Dalton, they're still 2-1, and they're home before a bye. Could be 3-1 going into the bye, which you'll take, and really not clicking yet. Is some of that rust, and you're seeing it around the league. Look at what Jacksonville's doing offensively. Pittsburgh's 3-0, but they can't score. I mean, is it just because a lot of these teams did not play their starters at all in the preseason?
I think it's a part of it. I do think league-wide quarterback play is a little bit down right now. We're not seeing a ton of quarterbacks play at an elite level anyway. But I think for the Lions, and there's other teams too, the Packers winning a couple of games with Malik Willis, I think there's something to be said for winning games when you don't play necessarily your best A-plus football, right? And the Lions being 2-1 through this. Look, the Rams, they went to overtime. This Cardinals game was close. The margins of error in the NFL are so small that there's a road here where the Lions could have been 3-0, and there's a road where they could have been 0-3. Honestly, you look at even the Kansas City Chiefs. They had opportunities to lose all 3 of the games they've played in, and they've just squeaked away with all 3. So the margins of error are so small, and it's hard to make the judgment based on your record, right? The fact that the Lions are 2-1. I think the fact that they're 2-1, despite not playing their best football, despite only outscoring their opponents by 9 points, I think it speaks to Dan Campbell and the experience they have gained the last 2 years. And they're not the only team that's done this, but to rack wins while you're still figuring it out. Because, right, Bill Belichick used to talk about that. You'd rather play your best football in December, January than you would in September. And if you can win games in September, executing at a 75, 80% rate, then that helps you in the long run.
I love the Belichick media tour, by the way, right now.
It's so great, isn't it?
I check his clips on McAfee. I love this stuff. He's doing stuff with Lombardi. Manning cast. I'm all in. There's something weird about him just smiling and opening up, right? I love it.
Yeah, I think, and I know they always got him as the grumpy guy in New England with the press conferences and stuff. I always loved it because there's a part of it where you could always tell, like, some of it was kind of in jest, and I think he had more personality than people gave him credit for. I love seeing it, and then he's just obviously just the football genius of all geniuses, right? I mean, it's incredible to hear him break down things on a daily and weekly basis. So we'll see if he's coaching again next year, but if he's not and he continues to do this, it's a lot of fun to watch.
Well, I think he's definitely putting on a nice show to get some interviews, and Dallas and Jacksonville could be on his list. All right, I want to ask a couple of college questions to Dalton, co-host of the PFF College Football Podcast. We'll get into that, and also the rest of the division in the NFC North. We'll do that next. And on a Wednesday, Locked On Lions is brought to you by BetterHelp. What's something you'd love to learn as an adult? Do you have time to learn new things? And if you don't, what was maybe lost in your childhood that you wish you could get back? Well, kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. What's something you'd like to learn? Well, therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because your back-to-school era can come at any age. Think about it. If you think about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And what's great about BetterHelp is you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Maybe you've been nervous about pulling the trigger on something like this. Seriously, consider BetterHelp. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Our man Dalton Wasserman with us from Pro Football Focus. Dalton, the Sam Darnold thing. I mean, everyone's like, oh, I kind of knew he was better than he was. It's like, this is nuts. But that was not just some win this weekend. I mean, they blew out a Super Bowl contender in Houston. So what do you think first in Minnesota? And what about the rest of the division so far?
Look, he was talented enough to be taken with the 3rd overall pick back in 2018, right? I don't know that, in NFL circles that a lot of people doubted his talent, but he was incredibly young back then, and execution is something, and a supporting cast is something, and it's something the Jets have finally learned to build, right, around the quarterback. But as far as Darnold goes, he's got the perfect storm of a good offensive line, a loaded group of weapons, and a great play caller. And he is playing better himself. He's not just being propped up. He's making big-time throws. He's throwing the ball on time in a way that's better than ever. His footwork is better. His timing is better. And I think he just has such a great grasp of Kevin O'Connell's offense. And O'Connell, this is such a fun offense to watch, honestly. He's one of probably the 5 best play callers in the league right now. It's such a huge help. We saw him have success last year with guys like Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins, and Sam Darnold's considered to be more talented than those guys, right? It's just such a great situation for him, and a guy who's still really young, 26, 27 years old. I think, look, this Minnesota thing is real. I think you mentioned it with the win over Houston. It becomes real. The combination of Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores as their defensive coordinator as well, there's not many teams that can match that. So it's a really well-coached team. It is a team with talent as long as they're healthy, and Darnold is playing well.
If you're Green Bay, are you rushing Love back? Or are you going, hey, wait a minute, maybe we can wait a little bit because all of a sudden Malik Willis is performing?
Well, if you have Jordan Love for this week's game against Minnesota, he probably needs to play. And really admire the job that Matt LaFleur did the last 2 weeks with Malik Willis, because when Jordan Love got hurt, we heard Malik Willis was starting after being on the team for 2 or 3 weeks. I think there was some panic in Green Bay and maybe for some people looking around Green Bay, but there was no panic from LaFleur. He got all the tools in the run game he's using right now. He's got a loaded group of receivers, and he just got Willis to play fundamentally sound football, and something he didn't have an opportunity really to do in Tennessee. If through 3 weeks, honestly, and I know Minnesota's been great, and I know a couple other teams have been great, I would give Coach of the Year to Matt LaFleur for what he's done these last 2 games. And they were very, very close to being 3-0, beating Philadelphia that first week, but just didn't make it happen. What he's done to rally this team, to find a way to score points, and look, to beat 2 competitive teams in Indianapolis and Tennessee and really clearly be the better team on the field, it's really impressive. So LaFleur, I said this earlier in the week to somebody, I don't think there have been 2 more consequential wins than the 2 wins the Packers just got. But Love has to get back in there at some point, right? He's still the key to their season.
Bears are Bearsing 1-2. There's an ugly game Sunday in Indy. Where's the blame? Eberflus, O-line? I don't think it's necessarily on Caleb Williams, is it?
No, not that he's playing great, but there is a wide-ranging offensive problem. We saw their pass protection has had issues so far this season. I believe they've allowed the 7th most pressures in the league. We saw they couldn't handle a blitz for anything against Houston. And a more concerning thing to me is just they signed DeAndre Swift and they have 3 decent backs. And the idea was that they're going to run the ball and balance things out. They're one of 6 or 8 teams I'm looking at right now with no balance. If they don't find anything in the run game, I mean, they've got backs. I think one of the last 2 games that they had like 17 carries for 27 yards or something of it. Some unsustainably low number of rushing yards that they're getting at week to week out of their backs right now. If they don't find a run game and they ask Caleb to carry their offense through difficulties in his rookie season, they're going to have a huge problem between just not being able to win football games. And then you really don't want any quarterback throwing it 50 plus times a game, but especially a rookie, even one that could be as good as Caleb Williams. I mean, I think it puts a lot of pressure on him, and honestly probably gets flashbacks from his USC days when he didn't have a ton of help from his run game and his defense and everything like that either. So you really don't want it to be like that. You want there to be a system. You want there to be a running game, and you want him to throw the ball maybe 30 times with efficiency. They have a team-wide offensive problem right now that is not isolated to Caleb.
Final thing, Michigan, a big win over USC. Winning a game despite the quarterback throwing for 32 yards. And MSU plays Ohio State this weekend. They have any shot? What are your thoughts on both those schools?
I'll tell you, I'll start with Michigan State. Better than we expected, and a tight game with Boston College, who's also a good team. I think you like what Jonathan Smith has brought in there, and they're playing good defense, they're playing physical. You have to like Ohio State in that game. That's just a different level of talent that we're talking about. But I really like the way Michigan State's playing. I do. They're already 3-1, is it? They're already the 3-1. Coming into the year, I wasn't sure they would win 3 games the whole season, and they've already got 3 wins. So Jonathan Smith was the right guy to hire, and they just need Aidan Childs to keep developing and getting a passing game going to kind of just get a little more explosiveness out of this offense. And Michigan, look, that was a season-saving win last week. It was. If they had lost to USC, I think they would have just been out of playoff contention, just pretty much done for with 2 losses on the books already. Their best players played the way they needed to play to win that game. The defensive line was dominant. It's arguably the best defensive line in the country. Josiah Stewart, what a year he's having so far. Man, Graham and Grant are usually the stars inside. Josiah Stewart has actually been their best player this year. Their pass rush was amazing in that game. Will Johnson with another pick 6. And then look, the passing game, I don't know if it's going to come. And if it's not going to, you might as well lean into the running game with Alex Orji, and Clell Mullings has been spectacular. He's really been their best offensive player. Donovan Edwards gets mixed in there too. It's just the blueprint way that Michigan has to win football games right now. And the quarterback play is a problem, and it's hard to win every week if you have, 30 passing yards, like you said. But that's the way they have to win football games, is lean on their defense, get ahead, lean on the run game, and let it rip. But I'll tell you, I just want to say, even in a losing effort, how good is Miller Moss, too, for USC? He's just so good. And he really, tell you what, he deserved to win that game in spite of what the result actually was.
Yeah, but at the end, he was running for his life.
All day he was. Michigan's pass rush was the dominant unit, and that's what they can do at their peak. Absolutely.
Yep, no question about it. Dalton, great stuff, my man. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it, as always, Matt.
Dalton Wasserman with us. Pro Football Focus tomorrow. The crossover with Corbin Smith from Locked On Seahawks.